And we are live. Nate, I was telling Michael before you got into the waiting room that if you were also wearing a navy shirt and glasses, we were going to have to shut the whole thing down
I usually
because it
wear
would
the
just be too
contacts. I
much.
thought, I thought, I thought we'd mix it up. Three white guys with glasses talking about New York. It's a certain genre, I guess, that we're going for.
Yeah.
Well, okay, to that point, I think obviously we're here to talk about the New York City mayoral primary, but as they did in the debates, as the candidates always do in situations like this, I think we have to prove our worthiness of New York, prove our New Yorker-ness. I think Michael might have us
Oh
beat on this,
no.
but Michael, why don't you introduce yourself and lay out what why you count as a New Yorker?
Oh, hi. My name is Michael Lang, Lange. I'm a political writer born and raised, based in New York City. Did a lot of writing on the New York City mayoral race. I guess I will take credit for saying that Jerome Mamdani was going to win, although he won by way more than I expected him to. And
And Michael, it counts. It counts.
it
You went
counts.
out on a
Yeah, thank
limb.
you. Thank
You
you.
didn't have
Thank
it pure 50-50. It 100% counts, and your
I
analysis was
appreciate
great.
that.
So
Oh, I'm
subscribe
glad.
to Michael's newsletter.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Wow, that's the validation that I was seeking. I guess how can I prove my native New Yorkerness? I was born at Roosevelt Hospital on West 58th Street, which is now Mount Sinai West. So I guess that shows you how things have kind of changed. Colson Whitehead said that you're a New Yorker when what was there before is more real than what's there now. And quite literally the place I was born um has changed.
Wait. Hold on. I got you beat then. I was born at St. Vincent's Hospital, which is now a luxury high rise. So
Wow. Okay.
I think I might actually have you beat there.
But you were
But
born in New York. You're born in New York City, Galen.
I was okay. Here's the story. I was born in New York City. My parents were living
Okay.
in Morningside Heights, moved to Flushing for affordability reasons. Then, when
Wow.
we started going to school, had to get into school, we moved to working class suburb Ossining, New York. Lived there until I was 10 or 11. And then we moved to a rural town in upstate New York outside of Syracuse. And then I moved back to New York City in my professional life. So, kind of like I may not be the biggest New Yorker, but I'm the most New York.
Like Mitt Romney was born, I think, in Detroit, right? And like, I don't know if you'd consider Mitt Romney a consummate Detroiter. Maybe a Michigander, but like, I think you're stretching the definition here a
Okay,
little
but
bit.
I've also lived the majority of my life in New York City, or it's
Okay,
the
okay,
longest I've lived
that
anywhere is New York
that
City.
counts. Yeah,
I've lived
yeah.
my whole life in New York City, absent
Oh, okay.
just my time in college. Oh no, I never. This was not a born and left thing. Like I am here. Ironically, I went to Boston College. A lot of great New Yorkers go to college at Boston, then come back, like AOC. But
Okay.
ironically, I was when I was in college, I started getting involved in politics here. But I wish I did a little more in Boston because I kind of missed the Michelle Wu rise, and she's someone that, in hindsight, I think is very similar to someone like Zohran Mamdani, right down to the free buses and the expanded rent control, rent stabilization, things like that. And
We're
that's
gonna
kind of
have
Yeah,
to
I
get.
guess people will make that comparison for being a more favorable pathway. You'll hear
yeah.
probably Brandon Johnson's name. I had some
Mhm.
Chicago friends texting me right about, oh no, he's very unpopular.
Well,
But like there are, yeah.
the two paths, right? It's the Michelle Wu or Brandon Johnson. Nate, we got to get to top line takeaways, but first, tell us why you count as a New Yorker, why you are qualified to
I
speak on this Substack Live.
I think because like I get really defensive when like people from not New York criticize New York and pretend New York is like some type of hellhole, like especially like the free market Silicon Valley types. I mean, look at the fucking rent in New York, right? Which
Yeah.
is a big theme, affordability in the
The girls
campaign.
are
But like,
crashing
if you're,
out. The girls are crashing out online.
I mean, look, I think people misunderstand. I think people don't understand the incredible diversity that you have in New York, including politically, right? It's like not monolithic, progressive, and that texturedness, right? I don't know as well as Michael, but like I've lived in a few different
No, yeah.
neighborhoods now, and I'm someone who gets around the city, and the texturedness of New York. Like someone was saying online the other day, like New York is ugly. I think New York, if you're like walking, you're running like the Williamsburg Bridge or something. There's so many beautiful. It's not beautiful like quite a conventional way, but I think New York is kind of pretty. Even that's how I'm a New Yorker.
Well,
Not
let
every
me let me
corner of it.
That was beautiful.
On that point, let me tell you how I started my day. Going for a run in Prospect Park and getting stuck behind a garbage truck that was going at exactly the same
Oh
speed
yeah.
that I was jogging, picking up all the trash in Prospect Park. So it is beautiful and also complex and quite smelly. Um, but okay, Michael, since you are the star of the show in a way, since you predicted
Oh
Zoran's
boy.
victory, why don't you start with your top line takeaway?
My top line takeaway is that, and shameless plug, I published an article in the New York Times yesterday about this very thing. So please check that out. There's a great interactive map. I don't get to do that very often. But Zohran Mamdani, he assembled this coalition that, number one, is of some of it's of the demographics in New York that are currently growing the most, right? The young urban professional class, young a young and very diverse Asian and Hispanic electorate. And he did really well with people who are working class, middle class, and upper middle class. But the theme that kind of brings them all together is that they are overwhelmingly renters. Whereas Andrew Cuomo did quite well with the homeowning class, particularly the black homeowning middle class, and then the ultra wealthy, right? Fifth Avenue, Central Park West, Riverside Drive, and then also with Orthodox and Hasidic Jews. But he kind of started the race with really pronounced advantages everywhere across the electorate, right? And over the last couple months, Zoran has really basically whittled into that lead and reduced his coalition like quite significantly. I was saying earlier, Nate, before you jumped on, I was like, this is the most embarrassing 36% I can remember. 36% is much higher than what Eric Adams had on the first round last time. But it really, I mean, just looking at the map, it really felt like Cuomo's coalition was a shell of what it once was. And in many respects it is. The last time he was on the ballot in New York City, he won 66% of the vote against
Yeah.
Cynthia Nixon. Now, I mean, I mean, it was crushing. Only up by 7, but by the final round, it'll probably be between 11 and 14%. He was crushed by the very person that he wanted the one-on-one with. So be careful what you wish.
So I remember that night of the 2018 gubernatorial primary. I was like out with my friend at like kind of a hipster bar in like, I don't know, central Manhattan, Flatiron, to the extent there are any. Um, and there was like a younger couple next to us, and they were expressing dismay. Oh, looks like Cuomo's gonna win. And my friend she's kind of a moderate Democrat. She's like, well, of course he is, right? Like it's Cuomo's really popular, and what did you think that Cynthia Nixon could win? So what changed, Michael, or Galen for that matter? I'm taking over hosting duties, I guess. What changed between 2018 and 2024? How much of it, or 2025, excuse me, how much of it is New York City versus New York State? How much of it is the sexual harassment scandals or scandals? How much of it is the mood shift in the country? What do you think?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, I think it's important to say that Cuomo wasn't even really at his true apex in 2018. That kind of came in 2020. People wanted him to take over from Joe Biden, swap the sleepy Biden off the ticket for, Andrew Cuomo, who did all those daily pandemic briefings, which, he was genuinely
Oh yeah.
good at that, right? And also, people wanted him to run for president in 2024. And then so 2020 was kind of his apex. And then very quickly, he has the fall from grace, right? Sexual harassment allegations start coming out. It's revealed that they intentionally undercounted nursing home deaths during the pandemic by several thousand. They rewrote a report. And then there was a bombshell report by the New York State Attorney General that basically found that these 11 allegations were certainly, that they were very credible and that Cuomo's denials were not. And then there was overwhelming pressure on him to resign. He was going to be impeached by the state legislature if he wasn't. So he resigns, briefly mulls, and a comeback a year later, decides against it, waits in the wings for Eric Adams was there were always kind of the specter of legal trouble haunting his administration. He kind of waits in a way that was similar to how he waited out David Patterson, who also had legal trouble when he was the governor, New York's first black governor, New York versus New York's second black mayor. Adams basically leaves the field, after his indictment that then goes away. And the path is kind of cleared for Cuomo to come back. But I mean, I think there were many ways that he could have run this race, or won the race, but he ran a shambolically awful campaign. I mean, people said, for a while, people were like, "Oh, you're harsh on him because you don't like him." And let's be clear, I do not like Andrew Cuomo. I am very pleased with what happened on Tuesday, but objectively, I mean, it was an atrocious campaign. They ran away from the media. They took the voters
Yeah.
of New York for granted. And I think all of us as New Yorkers, I take that very seriously. When you take the people who live and work here every day, when you take their support for granted, and he absolutely did. It was an unbelievably arrogant, the way they behaved,
Yeah.
the insinuations that you were not a real New Yorker if you did not support Andrew Cuomo. But they were very, they were preoccupied with all the wrong things. And I will say, I took some flack for this because the first poll that really showed the race was tightening. They had a meltdown on the internet, with they were yelling at the journalists, things like that. Like they're
Always,
coming
always a bad sign. Yeah,
always a
always a
terrible
bad
thing.
sign.
But they're like coming after Politico, and it's like, guys, like Politico is not really writing super negatively about you. And I distilled it as they were trying to spin the political class of the city when it's like you are actually at risk of losing a lot of your working class support. And of course, that was dismissed. But then you look at this map, and other than black voters, they hemorrhage support with Asian working class voters. They hemorrhage support with Hispanic working class voters. They won Staten Island by 9%. Which
Yeah.
is Staten,
Yeah.
that is the most Italian county in the United States. It's a very union dense county, but also the North Shore is very racially diverse. I mean, it was, again, an atrocious performance commiserate of an awful campaign.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think we can talk about some of the macro trends here as well, which is one of the challenges for progressives when they've run in the past is they've got like support amongst the white progressive professional class on lock, but they're not able to diversify that support. And it looks like Mamdani was able to do that. And what was the issue that he probably did that on? Affordability. I mean, if you sort of just look at the streetscape of the city, the only evidence that there was a New York mayoral campaign going on were all of these Make New York Affordable signs from Zohran Mamdani's campaign. And he kicked off his campaign in the Bronx. By the way, he did not do very well in the Bronx, so I don't know how many of these voters he ended up winning over, but talking to Trump voters in the Bronx saying, what do you care about? And it was affordability, affordability, affordability. And so while he may not have got that exact type of voter, he was able to expand beyond I mean, if you look at the map, he ultimately did the best in places like East Williamsburg, Bushwick, Ridgewood, Greenpoint, the commie corridor, as you've taken to calling it, Michael, which is the kind of place you would expect to go overwhelmingly for an AOC type or even an Elizabeth Warren or what have you, or maybe Maya Wiley in the last mayoral primary or something like that. Big fans of Jumaane Williams, the public advocate, etc. But it didn't stop there. I mean, the fact that he won Manhattan is a pretty big. I mean, these are all preliminary results, but the fact that Zohran Mamdani won Manhattan and was getting some of those downtown places, was getting uptown, like East Harlem and sort of Hamilton Heights area, I think is significant. And so, yes, Cuomo ran a very bad campaign. And I don't think that the lesson from this is that New York City is all of a sudden like a democratic socialist dream. I think that in a general, under different circumstances, it could still be quite hard to win as a democratic socialist in New York City. But he was able to use an issue to sort of combine the two pieces of the Democratic Party that progressives have had difficulty combining.
Well, I
I mean,
will
there
also
is
say, oh, sorry, Nate, go ahead.
there is an important point here that gets neglected, which is like having a higher floor among your worst groups is important, right? He got his core, the commie corridor, whatever else, right? Upper middle class kind of New York Times readers, even though the Times kind of anti-endorsed him. We can talk about that potentially. People ignored that, it seemed like. But like he has broad enough appeal and presented enough energy that Mamdani held his own even in Staten Island, for example. Even in the Upper East Side, yes, the actual Central Park East voted for Cuomo. You go just a couple more blocks in, right? And you start to see some Mamdani precincts there as well. Yeah, Cuomo, I mean, people are like, well, Cuomo ran like a lot of like ads on like linear TV, right? I don't watch TV, right? I read the internet and have conversations with friends, but mostly read the internet and walk around my neighborhood a lot. And there was like no presence whatsoever of like Cuomo's campaign, right? He had no themes. He was not like a protagonist of the story almost. He became an antagonist and allowed Mamdani to become the
Well,
protagonist, right? And like I don't know, because it's always easy to say post facto, this guy underperformed expectations, therefore he ran a bad campaign. But it was bizarre and kind of entitled.
well,
It was the
you asked
worst. Oh, I
you
was just
asked
gonna say it
what
was the
changed.
worst. Sorry. Go ahead.
You asked what changed, Nate, between 2018 and now, and it's people's feelings about the Democratic Party, Democrats' feelings about the Democratic Party. To
Yes.
sort of,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, take a page from your book, Michael. I also write something in the Times that came out on Monday that was called "Why Democrats Need Their Own Trump," and it was, a headline that was meant to grab people's attention more than anything. But one of the main points is that in order to turn the page, a successful Democrat is likely to run against the Democratic Party. And Cuomo became, what people's negative feelings about the Democratic Party post Biden, post inflation, post all, the 2024 loss. And Zohran Mamdani became, what's that famous quote from the 1992 election? I look at Andrew Cuomo and I think of last year's calendar. That's not a great place to be when you're looking at a party where a majority of Democrats themselves don't like Democratic leadership in Washington. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what changed. Democrats themselves don't like where their party is at.
I think also, Cuomo, as you said, Cuomo very neatly embodied this kind of atrophying establishment, right? He himself was like a Clinton aide. I think also what makes this race so interesting is you can do all the, you can look at it really from a national perspective, but you can also look at it from a local perspective. And you mentioned that when Zohran launched his campaign, he was talking to Trump voters in the Bronx. And like, while he didn't win Fordham Road in the Bronx, he was also talking to Trump voters along Hillside Avenue in Queens, which is little Bangladesh, right? And a lot of folks, not only did they talk about cost of living, they also talked about the war in Gaza, things like that. That South Asian corridor along Hillside Avenue turned out for Mamdani incredibly well, right? You mentioned that some of his best neighborhoods, Greenpoint, Ridgewood, etc. Right below that is like Westchester Square, Jamaica Hills, Kensington, these neighborhoods with large South Asian populations that for once they kind of had a candidate of their own. And while, of course, he did well with kind of the younger urban professional class, he just dominated purely with voters under 45, with voters under 50 across all races, right? And you cannot sweep all of Bushwick, sweep all of Bedford-Stuyvesant, sweep all of Hamilton Heights without those types of margins. Cuomo was so reduced that in those neighborhoods, all he could win were public housing developments and senior centers. That was it, because he really he hemorrhaged support, and it's because Mamdani, on all the mediums that young people use, he was ubiquitous there, right? Everyone I knew was asking me, "Wait, this is like your guy, you know him, da 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 da. Like, what's happening here?" And where Cuomo was just not, he just was not present at all, and very much distilled the generation gap in terms of how people feel about politics, but also just how they kind of consume their news and are met where they are.
I thought he also kind of presented a very like familiar New York archetype, right?
Yes.
Bright young guy. You're not even quite sure exactly what mix of ethnic groups he is, but he's well presented. He works hard, clearly very ambitious. And New York likes people who are ambitious, right? It likes people who are hustling a little bit. You can take it too far. With Andrew Yang, it became like too much of a shtick, right? And he
Yeah.
was doing stunts, and this seemed to work. I mean, I think he also kind of like caught the media a little bit by surprise. People just assumed, oh, Cuomo's running, and there's a bunch of no names who can't coordinate, and so it's going to be Cuomo, and then we'll see if anything interesting happens in the general election, right? And like the timing was good. I still wonder. I mean, his margin was so impressive. I think it's pretty overdetermined and coming on high turnout, right? I still wonder if there are alternate scenarios where I mean, once the ball got rolling, then I think it was his to lose, right? I wonder when. I mean, when did you think, Michael, that oh my gosh, Cuomo's actually really in